While we've already received some big titles in 2023, there are a lot of really exciting games that are still coming out later in the year. So I want to talk about some of the biggest games still coming in 2023. A like would really help us out, and let's go. So one title that might not be on your radar yet is Atlas Fallen. This open world RPG is being developed by Deck 13, the people behind The Surge and The Surge 2, and it has some pretty unique ideas that it brings to the table. A big part of the story is the magical gauntlet that your character is in possession of, which is in some way related to the event that covered most of the world in sand. It gives you access to some cool powers though, like the ability to lift buried structures out of the sand, which will often be needed to create new pathways or platforms for traversal, which will for sure come in useful during side quests or when hunting for upgrade materials or essence stones that can grant you new passive and active abilities, which is the main way of becoming more powerful. The gauntlet also allows for a really cool mode of traversal where you're almost skating across the sand, which is very stylish, and the combat is much more hack and slash than the studio's previous work, and a lot of previews have compared it to games like Darksiders and the older God of War games. Your weapons also power up the more damage you deal, which in turn makes you take more damage, so you have to balance your charge by using special abilities. So some interesting new ideas on display here. I'm very curious to try it out when it launches on May 16th. Now, one of the biggest titles of 2023 is without a doubt Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Insomniac already knocked it out of the park with the first game in Miles Morales, and now the two Spider-Men will be teaming up to take down Venom, as we can see in the teaser trailer. That's the only official info we have, alongside a blog post that revealed the addition of Tony Todd as Venom to the cast. That same actor recently tweeted we should expect the game to release in September, but with no official confirmation yet, take that with a grain of salt. We do know from Insomniac themselves that Spider-Man 2 will still be releasing in the fall of 2023. I'm personally really excited to see more of Miles and Peter together, as I think we get to see missions like the opening of Miles Morales much more frequently in the sequel. And of course, with Venom taking center stage, there's always the possibility that we get some symbiote powers ourselves. Again, this should be a huge exclusive for PlayStation, and I can't wait. And while it's nowhere near as high profile as Spidey, I've been hearing some pretty good things about Lies of P. This Souls-like has you playing as Pinocchio. Yes, the one that you probably know from the Disney movie, although this is a much darker retelling of that story. As a mechanical puppet trying to become human, you must fight your way through the dangerous city of Krat, encountering many imposing bosses along the way. You gain access to a lot of different weapons to defeat them, as well as swappable parts of your body called Legion arms that allow you to perform unique attacks like this grappling hook. Lying is also a big part of the game, as depending on the lies you tell people, you will have different interactions with them or even different endings to the story. Very curious how that's going to work exactly, but we will find out when Lies of P releases in August this year. And with the support for Assassin's Creed Valhalla having come to an end, it's of course high time for a new Assassin's Creed game. And while we don't have an official release date yet, AC Mirage should also release in 2023. From what we've learned, it's a return to form in many ways, focusing more on the stealth and parkour mechanics that made people fall in love with the franchise, and less so on the big open world and RPG mechanics that were introduced in Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla. We'll be following a younger Basim, so it takes place before our meeting with him in Valhalla in his journey to becoming an assassin, while he's also struggling with the resurfacing memories of the Isu Loki in his DNA. While we will be able to visit the assassin fortress of Alamut, most of the game will be focused on the city of Baghdad, which will have distinct districts to keep environments varied as you traverse the world to find your target. Nothing big has been announced after the initial information blowout, but the most recent leaks suggest that we should see gameplay in June, supposedly during E3, which runs from June 13th to June 16th. Now, a game that's been on my radar for a very long time is Baldur's Gate 3, developed by the Belgian Larian Studios, also known for the Divinity series. It's exciting to me because it's based on Dungeons and Dragons, but even if you know nothing about that, there's still plenty to be excited about. The game setting is very high fantasy, with dragons, necromancers, and threats from beyond your world trying to use or kill you. We have big names like J.K. Simmons and Matthew Mercer lending their voices for some of the characters, but the biggest selling point is the incredible flexibility of combat. While it is turn-based, you really are only limited by your own creativity, as you can do things like create oil spills and then light them on fire with a fireball, or pick up your known party member and use them as a projectile, or much more crazy stuff. With 12 playable classes at launch, each with their own set of skills and spells, and the option to play through the entire game in 2 to 4 player co-op, including 2-player split screen, you shouldn't get bored with this one anytime soon. While you can already play a big chunk of the game currently in early access, the full version is releasing in August of this year. But before that, we'll already have gotten our hands on Jedi Survivor, the sequel to 2019's Fallen Order that's coming out on April 28th. We'll once again be following Jedi Cal Kestis in an adventure set 5 years after the original. And while Cal has certainly upped this game with new lightsaber configurations, force powers and more, exploration should also be much more exciting, with more open areas, some of which will even have us use mounts for traversal. And we don't have to go at it alone anymore either, as we'll also have companions fighting alongside us for some parts of the game. We've known about the jetpack boosting soldier boat for a while now, but the most recent story trailer also showed everyone's favorite Night Sister Marin teaming up with Cal and busting out some sweet moves. It's ticking all the right boxes for a sequel, including more cosmetic options than just ponchos, so really, what's not to love? If you want to learn more about the big changes Jedi Survivor is making, we have a video about that up on the channel, which I'll link to in the video description. And if you dig the weird aliens, spaceships and futuristic weapons, but prefer things a bit darker and grittier, then you should definitely add Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 to your wishlist. While Captain Titus will be returning as the protagonist for this sequel, I don't think playing through the first game is required to enjoy the rush of being a Space Marine and mowing through hordes of enemies. You'll do so with a wide variety of equipment, like the jump pack that can be used to keep your distance with ranged weapons or close in for some melee action. Iconic weapons like bolters, thunder hammers and of course the chainsword return as well, and you will need them to stop the hordes of Tyranids who will be our main enemy for the game. Although if the last game is anything to go by, we can expect new enemy factions to show up over the course of the campaign to keep us on our toes. While we have little information about Space Marine 2 as of so far, the most recent trailer that aired at the Game Awards listed the game for 2023, so expect a proper release date later in the year. Another title we know very little about but should still be hitting this year is Massive's Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. We'll be playing as a Na'vi and exploring locations on Pandora that have not been seen before, but there will still be a lot of familiar elements. We will be able to fly banshees and fight the RDA's Maxon aircraft, and all of this will be experienced from a first-person perspective. The devs have also gone on record saying the power of the next-gen consoles really helped them level up the open world, especially when it comes to AI and NPCs. While it's been pretty much radio silent since the first reveal trailer, an image with pre-order bonuses leaked recently, which should mean we get a proper announcement with the release date pretty soon. For now, we just know the game should still release in 2023 or early 2024 at the latest. Now, the games we've mentioned so far are all paid titles, but there are also some exciting free-to-play titles that will be coming out this year. Like Blue Protocol, for instance, a free-to-play MMO action RPG with a very distinct style. It looks like a cross between Xenoblade and Genshin Impact, although it has more in common with the latter when it comes to gameplay. While there are a lot of MMO staples, like different classes with their own abilities, partying up with other players and dungeons and raids, combat is very action-focused. So you'll need to dodge and block enemy attacks while weaving in your own combos and powerful ultimate abilities. No release date yet, but the official website notes the game should be available to download in the second half of 2023. And if that's all too colorful for you, don't worry, as you can literally delve into hell and get your dark fantasy fix on June 6th when Diablo 4 releases. It's got everything the Diablo franchise is known for: dark gothic atmosphere, over-the-top skills, hordes of enemies, and of course tons of loot. But I was surprised to find that the newly added open world and online elements also add a lot to the game during my playtime with the beta. The map is positively massive and filled with dungeons to explore, and world events with varying objectives pop up all over the place, meaning there's always something going on when you're traveling around. The 5 playable classes also offer a lot of variety, and thanks to the expansive skill trees, you can change up the way each class plays significantly as well. If you're looking for something a bit more unique, then it's worth keeping an eye on Immortals of Aveum. While we know very little about the game, it's set in a brand new fantasy world and is being described as a magic shooter, while you'll be using sigils to focus the power within you. So I assume picking up different sigils will grant you access to different spells, but at the very least a magic-based first-person shooter sounds very interesting. I'm also betting on this being a shooter focused heavily on the campaign, like Doom Eternal for instance, because the official website repeatedly mentions that we should expect a visceral and cinematic campaign experience. And while this is their first project, there's no shortage of talent at developer Ascendant Remnant Studios. CEO Brad Robbins worked on Dead Space and multiple Call of Duty campaigns, and the team is composed of veterans who worked on franchises like Borderlands, Halo, GTA, and more. No word on when we'll hear more, but the game is planned to release this year. And 2023 also marks the year that Bethesda will finally release the long-awaited Starfield. This open-world space exploration RPG, so basically Fallout but in space, releases on September 6th now. We already know a lot about the crazy amount of customization that's going to be in the game, which goes beyond character creation, as you can also create your own outposts and even fully customize and fly your own spaceship. There's of course resources to collect, loot to find, and skills to level up as well, and the galaxy is absolutely massive with over 1,000 planets to explore. So it's sounding like Starfield is everything you could want out of a Bethesda game, but turned up to 11. I'm still curious about things like combat and interactions with NPCs, but Todd himself promised us we'd learn more about the game during the Starfield Direct, which is on June 11th, so relatively soon. Another game I'd love to hear more about is Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn. Originally announced for early 2023, this game is described as a cross between the Souls-like combat and exploration of Elden Ring and the cinematic flair and polish of God of War. Add to that a variety of flintlock pistols and rifles, a magic fox-like companion called Enki who will help protagonist Nor both in and outside of combat, and you've got a pretty interesting concept already. You are also encouraged to switch up your moves and be acrobatic during combat, as there's a scoring system active that rewards you for fancy footwork and varied combos, giving you more reputation that you can use to buy new weapons and armor at your caravan. But if you're really looking for a flashy combat system with a very agile playable character, then I think you'll do no better than Final Fantasy XVI. The game has looked continuously more impressive with each trailer, and the recent previews showed us even more spectacle. Especially the econ battles where you turn into a giant elemental monster and fight it out with your opponent kaiju style look really impressive. But even in his human form, protagonist Clive is still a force to be reckoned with thanks to the variety of movesets that draw on the power of the different econs. You can unleash fiery attacks with Phoenix, impressive aerial combos with Garuda, or strong slams and even blocks with Titan. And there will be even more movesets to unlock over the course of the game. There's some incredible talent at work here as well, like DMC5 veteran Ryota Suzuki and of course Naoki Yoshida as a producer, who previously turned the MMO Final Fantasy XIV into the success it is now. Oh, and did I mention that you also have a dog as a party member and he helps out in combat? It's honestly one of my most hyped titles of the year, and it's releasing on June 22nd exclusively on PS5. Speaking of dogs, there is another game that lets you take the best boys out on an adventure, and that's Remnant 2. We can see a companion dog fighting enemies and even reviving the player in the most recent trailer. The dog is actually part of the handler archetype, which is one of the several classes you can pick and level up in the game. The reworked archetype system actually allows you to pick two at the same time, so you can mix and match class skills to create something really unique. Like the previous title, Remnant 2 is a third-person action roguelike with both melee and ranged combat. This of course also means that the world and the encounters in it will be shaken up each time you die, but this time there will even be different storylines that you can encounter depending on what areas you come through, each with their own NPCs and bosses. The game can be played solo or with up to 2 other players and is coming out in the summer of this year. If you're up for more co-op monster shooting a bit earlier in the year, you'll be right at home with Arcane's Redfall, which will be launching on May 2nd. While it will retain the world building and storytelling the studio already put on display in the Dishonored and Prey games, Redfall is a big step outside Arcane's comfort zone and pulls a lot of influence from other titles. We have 4 different characters, each with their own skill trees and weapons with different modifiers and rarities, kind of like the Borderlands series, and an island with outposts to liberate and regional bosses to take down, quite like Far Cry. But it will all be wrapped in a very unique vampire setting that will take us to these reality-bending vampire nests and introduce some crazy boss fights against the vampire gods that have taken over the island of Redfall. And I have to say, it's looking like a great year to be a Souls-like fan. We've already mentioned multiple games of this genre in the video, but I also want to add the Lords of the Fallen to that list. I was immediately drawn to the very grim and sometimes even disturbing art style, as well as the interesting gameplay ideas that it brings to the table, because your character is able to travel between both the realms of the living and the realm of the dead, which means that your usual trip back to recover your lost currency at your spot of death we've done in these games hundreds of times now is suddenly a lot more interesting, as you'll only have one chance to make it back to the same spot in the realm of the dead, which looks much more dangerous. It's ticking a lot of Souls-like boxes, like multiplayer, both co-op and invasions, lots of weapons to choose from. Again, I really love the art style, so I'll be trying this one out when it releases later this year. Now, sometimes you don't want all that doom and gloom and you're more in the mood for some over-the-top fun. Well, look no further than Exoprimal for that. While there are some clever ideas in the gameplay loop, I think the main appeal of the game is already clear from looking at the gameplay. You're fighting armies of dinosaurs with a mech suit. These mech suits come in different classes like assault, support and tank, and can be swapped out on the fly to change team composition, because you will be playing as a team of 5 in this game, competing against another team of 5 to complete a set of objectives as quickly as possible. Sometimes these objectives will require you to fight members of the enemy team, and some of them will require both teams to work together in order to complete it. So a very interesting mix of PvE and PvP elements. It's coming out on July 14th for if you want to give it a shot. Or alternatively, you can take a zombie-infested holiday trip to Los Angeles. I'm of course talking about Dead Island 2, which is finally coming out on April 21st. You crash land into a zombie-infected LA and discover that you are in fact immune to the virus, so you decide to make a living cleaning up The Walking Dead. You'll do so in various iconic locations, including a mission set in a Hollywood film studio. It's not an open world though, instead you'll travel between various instance locations, so think Borderlands, which will have their own side quests you can partake in. But the main draw is of course beating zombies to a pulp, and thanks to the skill card system you can really customize your own playstyle. There are also tons of different melee weapons that can be equipped with crazy mods to apply elemental damage, as well as an array of firearms and some finishing moves that would make even the Doomslayer blush. It's looking like a very over-the-top experience that can be made even more enjoyable with friends, as the game also supports co-op for up to 3 players. And stay tuned for more Dead Island 2 on the channel, by the way, as we have a big video coming very soon. If it's already up, you can watch it by clicking on the screen. Otherwise, subscribe to not miss that, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye!